The Spin-off Podcast Network.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Welcome to
Only Murders in the Building,
the official podcast.
Join me, Michael Cyril Creighton, as we go behind the scenes with some of the amazing actors, writers, and crew from Season 5.
The audience should never stop suspecting anything.
How can you not be funny crawling around on a coffin? No, that's true.
Catch Only Murders in the Building official podcast, now streaming wherever you get your podcasts. And watch Only Murders in the Building, streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
Mai haere mai kei te whakarongo mai koe ki, ka hinga I te tina. Is that, how do you think about that?
Wow.
Annabelle?
He miharo ki au.
Okay. Annabelle Limatha here, Ben Thomas there, Te Ahi Butler over yonder, a distant corner, keeping well away from us. And he's keeping well away from us because we have misled you. We have to formally apologise at the top here. We did a bit, I suppose, at the top of the live episode. Hey, thanks to everyone at Word Christchurch for coming. It was a really fun time.
Funnily enough, I thought I was being heckled and it turned out to be my whanaunga. You know you're in Ngaitahi country when you're getting heckled by your whanaunga, but it's not heckles, it's aroha.
But also we did a sort of just a very clearly comedy bit at the top, which it seems like a lot of otherwise well-adjusted, intelligent people mistook. I'm not victim blaming.
You are victim blaming. That's so rude. It's hard to tell when you're just listening.
Well,
the audience got it,
Whānau,
you didn't.
The audience, I'm pretty sure the audience got it, the live audience. Maybe you needed to see our kind of on-stage eyebrow-themed responses in order to fully capture. So this is our way of saying, do come to the next live show. There are layers you're missing in this single dimension. How are you, Ben?
I'm good. Definitely come to the next live show. We'll be able to put on a way better show with $70 million of funding from the government for major events, including podcasts, I assume.
We should play Eden Park.
Our 7-night run at Eden Park.
At Eden Park or sort of outside Eden Park? Leaning up.
I think like
does that qualify?
At Eden Park, but you know, sort of broadcast so that like Helen Clark can hear from a few streets over.
Yeah, at Helen's place.
Big fan of the show.
Before we get into it, just briefly some news that's emerged in the last couple of hours, which is a bit more of the same or maybe even slightly worse than expected. That is to say, the economy contracted by 0.9% in the quarter to June. The immediate response from the government is Donald Trump's fault. The Trump slump, and fair bit in that, I suppose, but it's the sort of overall overarching narrative, Ben, as we approach the next election, which is that this is the weather, and the weather is meant to turn, and the weather hasn't turned. It must be causing some concern, notwithstanding the reality that these are numbers up to June, so they're not current, but it doesn't feel as though the sun is bursting through the clouds as we speak.
Yeah, that's right. It's the economic recovery is sort of happening a lot like my university assignments, where it's like, not quite, look, I know I told you tomorrow, but maybe next week,
but ending in glorious victory.
yeah, it'll be great when it comes. And the various forecasts and projections, have been sort of, suggesting that we'd be sort of on the up, before now. Obviously various factors, including, the Trump tariffs and global instability, which have really sort of knocked that around in the previous quarter. So, these are the figures for April, May, June this year. But much worse than anyone expected. I think the bank economists thought maybe the economy would have contracted by about 0.5% during that period, actually 0.9%. Per capita GDP is down, I think, about 2% year on year. So that's once you've adjusted for population growth. Stats NZ may as well have just sent out a press release, with the headline, you're not crazy, your feelings are valid, because it essentially just sort of confirms the sort of, the national mood of sort of malaise, that's, kind of taken root. Look, according to the projections, again, we could be in the middle, we could be beginning the recovery already. But people certainly don't seem to be feeling that on the ground. One of the sort of key issues, polling stats that's come out over the last sort of couple of months is that, after sort of steadily declining for a couple of years, cost of living has really again skyrocketed amongst voter concerns. The Ipsos Issues poll, I think about 6 months ago, it was down to only 50% of respondents said that cost of living was in their top 3 issues, and that was about a 3-year low for that poll. But now, 6 months on, it's 60% again. Taxpayers Union poll a few months ago, cost of living had actually been dethroned as the top single issue for voters. The general economy had sort of overtaken it. Fast forward to this month, and it's back with a vengeance. It's higher than for a year or so. I think 27% of people said it was their chief concern. And this is obviously not exactly what a government that campaigned on fixing the cost of living crisis wants to hear, and in particular, a government that said this is the year of economic growth. Everything, the kitchen sink's getting thrown at economic growth.
Yes.
I think that the other problem they have is that, when the economy started to sink under Labour, they were adamant that it had nothing to do with any international forces, and that it was entirely because of, their domestic policy. But now they're trying to say that the problems that this government currently faces is because of, tariffs. And the reality is that a large part of it is because of tariffs, just like under the last government, a large part of it was because of the the shockwaves still happening because of COVID.
External forces.
Yeah, but that's the real challenge that this government faces, is that their fortunes now are tied to the decisions made by Donald Trump, and that's a really difficult position to be in.
There was I saw a tweet by the recently returned Henry Cook, back in New Zealand as the deputy political editor for the Post. He tweeted that there was at a stand up today, being asked about the economic growth figures. Nicola Willis, who, if you'll recall, was made the Minister for Economic Growth at the beginning of the year by the Prime Minister as part of this economic growth agenda, going for growth agenda.
Yeah, I forgot that.
She told reporters that she had spoken with the Prime Minister about, whether he wanted her to continue in that portfolio, given the statistics, and said that, he had relayed that he had confidence in her. And I mean, really interesting that conversation would be taking place. That's a mark of, how much pressure there is in this area. But also interesting that, for Luxon, who has, again, really been struggling with those leadership statistics, and the polls, in terms of his own approval and his relative position as preferred PM with, Chris Hipkins, I think it's pretty telling that, he was like, you're not going anywhere. We're, we're not making this a Christopher Luxon problem again.
Yeah. We're both sailing this outcomes ship all the way together.
Yeah.
That partly explains why Chris Hipkins of the Labour Party, their approach is very much keep your heads down and let attention focus on the other lot. They had a bit of a cold awakening the other day, Annabelle, when the Tamaki Makaurau by-election results came in. We were messaging each other on the night itself, and it coming in pretty much finished about 2-1 for Orini Kaipara of Te Pāti Māori over Penny Henare of the Labour Party. Before we get into some of the fallout from that, it was a very brief moment of victory unalloyed for Te Pāti Māori. Briefly on the result, what do you put that down to? What does that result tell us?
Firstly, an astounding result. I really thought that it was going to be quite a close run thing. So for her to essentially have double the votes that he did, I thought was, a really remarkable achievement for Orini and her team. A lot of her team are her close kura friends that she went to Whānau Waititi with, and they walked beside her every step of the way. That they deserve to be acknowledged for the mahi that they did. I think there's a couple of factors at play. I think the very simple argument that was able to be put to voters is that if you vote for Orini, you can have Orini and Penny. I personally think that Māori voters are very astute. They've got a really good handle on MMP, and you see huge churn in the Māori seats. You see a lot more churn in the Māori seats than you do in the general seats. And I think that it was, despite Penny's, experience and all of those things, it was a compelling argument that you could have 2 for 1. And even though Labour kept referencing their candidate who would come in on the list off the back of Penny if he was to be successful, who I'm sure is a very fine person, that person wasn't campaigning. Orini was. Orini is a very well-known, she has a very high profile. She grew, I think, over the course of the campaign. I think she surprised people by her ability to step out of the role of a broadcaster and into a campaigner. Obviously, everybody is aware of the Q&A interview. I haven't watched it, but I heard that it wasn't strong. I think it was a interesting call that her team made to put her on that show. I mean, even the most seasoned politicians don't want to be on it. And I think that, it was a big call to put someone of her experience on there. And obviously, it was sounds like it was, a bit of an ordeal for her, but it seems that it didn't seem to change the mind of Māori voters. But in a nutshell, I think that's what it really comes down to. I don't think that it's necessarily a vote against Penny. I think it was about being able to have two Māori MPs for the price of one. And the thing with Orini is, she is a raukura of Whānau Waititi. Whānau Waititi is basically a tribe of its own now. For every person that you went to school with, you get their mum, their dad, their auntie, their uncle, their kids, their mokopuna. So it's a really strong a network of voters that she has behind her. And even though Penny is very popular, I don't think he has the same kind of community machinery behind him here in Tāmaki, certainly in the north, but not necessarily here in Tāmaki, because this is where Orini was born and raised.
It wasn't long, however, before that story was completely subsumed, certainly in mainstream coverage, by another story relating to Pāti Māori, which had emerged in the last week of that campaign, where Taku Te Wheres, the MP for Te Tai Tonga, posted an image of, it was Arena Williams. I think she'd posted campaigning for Penny Henare in the seat with a group of ethnically diverse Labour volunteers and advocates, and he said, "This blows my mind. Indians, Asians, Black and Pākehā campaigning to take a Māori seat from Māori." And that caused a fair bit of backlash. We heard from Chris Hipkins that Debbie Ngarewa-Packer, the co-leader of Te Pāti Māori, had privately apologised to him for that. And then I think it was shortly after the election, Taku Te Wheres did something which is always a good idea, post on social media shortly after midnight, just your thoughts in the moment, and doubled down on the position, and that created further ruction perceptions of disagreements within Te Pāti Māori, and according to some, and certainly between Te Pāti Māori and the Labour Party, whose challenge is, among other things, to present a case leading into the next election that they could potentially work together in some form or other. John Tamihere eventually, I mean, the co-leaders kind of weren't visible, and John Tamihere appeared and made some sound points, I think, about the way that the party deals with its own issues, which are very sound. He also said, and this was, I thought, quite funny, he said that the framing was the issue. The substance was okay, the framing was the issue. And immediately after saying the issue was the framing, he said, "It is wrong for other folk to politic in Māori seats because I don't go over to the country like the British Raj and destroy India. I don't rage the opium war as the British did with the Chinese. I don't place all people from Africa into slavery like white Europe." Just like a little lesson in framing from John Tamihere. I mean, a really interesting episode in terms of seemingly throwing fuel onto a fire. Jack McDonald, really interesting, former Te Pāti Māori strategist, advisors, also for the Green Party, had a really interesting column in the Post, I thought, on this, if you haven't seen it. What did Jack McDonald said? Jack. He praised Taku Te Wheres' maiden speech, said it was one of the best he's ever seen. And then he went on to say, but his recent comments at best crude and misguided, and at worst racist and damaging to the Tino Rangatiratanga movement. Either way, they were offensive and harmful for many marginalised communities. And then went on to say of John Tamihere backing the substances, and doing so undermine the authority of party leaders Rawiri Waititi and Debbie Ngarewa-Packer, who had apologised on behalf of the party.
I mean, where do you begin? It's just so bad, all of it. The whole thing's bad. I mean, for a start, there's the post itself, like Indians and blacks, trying to take a seat. A seat. What was it? Read that last bit of it.
Campaigning to take a Māori seat from Māori.
I mean, I don't know if Tākuta is aware of this, but Penny Henare is actually a Māori. So no one's trying to take anything off a Māori. This is about other ethnic communities who call Aotearoa home, getting involved in the democratic process and actually supporting a Māori campaign, a Māori candidate, to win their electorate seat. I don't know why that appears to be so offensive to Tākuta. Not to mention how incredibly reckless it was to post something like that basically on the eve of the vote closing in Tamaki, could have really hurt Orini's chances. I think initially the party responded really well and apologised, got the post down, cleaned it up quickly, but oh no, Uncle's back on the Instas at midnight. What is that about in the first place? Like, close the laptop. Nobody needs to be posting at that time of the evening. And then from there, it's got worse. And it's quite interesting because I see, quite differing perspectives on how this is now played out and how it's received. Younger people talking about, this is just part of systemic change and being supportive of takuta, which really surprises me. And then others who think that not only what he said was terrible, but the fact that his co-leaders apologised and then he went and posted again anyway, is, to quote my friend Kiriama Wright, senior journalist on Pukaya, also co-host of my favourite podcast, Something for the People, that he... There's no other option. He has to go because I takahi ia I te mana o ngā kaya arahi o Tauaropu. He has trampled on the mana of his leaders. That's it, before we even talking about those communities that are involved in the post.
There seems to be some kind of sort of ructions within the caucus. Mariamino Kapakingi was reallocated or stripped of the whip's position. Now, I mean, and Debbie Ngāti Wapaka, the co-leader, took up that role, and sort of said, "Well, this is just a reshuffle because we've got a new MP. We're just sorting out responsibilities." Kapakingi didn't seem happy with that, but didn't sort of go into any other details. There is an argument that just on sort of a KPI or performance basis, she should have been reallocated from that position. The whip is in charge of making sure that people are in Parliament and making sure that, all of the procedural stuff gets done, which is something where the Te Pāti Māori is basically just completely absent, generally. But, there's sort of whispers that it's kind of, the kohanga kids, the young guns versus, the old guard, those veterans who have been in Parliament for 4 years, or the Tamahiri, sort of loyalists, I guess. But who knows what the sort of substance of that is.
Tamahiri's comments didn't really seem to bear that out, given he kind of went into bat for Tākuta.
Oh, well, I mean, I think you would certainly think that there is an interest in trying to, mend any kind of division or sort of, put to rest any sort of conflicts. JT's a pretty experienced operator. Because this is the issue, right? What do you do with a rogue MP who is, trampling over what the leader is saying in public? If you're the Prime Minister, you can say, well, I'm sacking you from cabinet, I'm blocking you from promotion. If your MP's in opposition, what Takuta Ferris said, if you substitute the word mana for, political power, it's about right. He said that each of the 6 tohe, in which, the Te Pāti Māori has seats, has equal mana. So he was basically sort of saying, look, we're just 6 people and we've all got an equal say and there's no hierarchy here. And I don't know whether that sort of reflects his kind of, kohanga kid sort of upbringing, where there's a sort of trend to sort of say, oh, mana rangatiratanga, it's all about the individual, the rangatiratanga mana motuhake sort of, can be exercised and or is inherent in the individual as opposed to hapu or iwi. Debbie and Rawari are both more sort of kind of hapu kind of people, I would have thought. But it is very interesting the way that he certainly sort of seems to conceive of Te Pāti Māori as a project. It's also interesting how it's been characterised. I mean, I think Takuta Ferris is older than Rawari Waititi, isn't he? He's I think he's a couple of years
possibly.
older.
Do you want me to
but
Google
yeah,
it?
it's, you know,
Hold
it's,
the line caller.
you know,
Scintillating
it's not a huge
podcast
thing. It's
activity
just,
here.
People
We
love it.
kind of
it's not, you know, there certainly seems to be some sort of divergent viewpoint here, and this was something that came up in the original iteration of the Māori Party, which, you know, I think Jack McDonald sort of alluded to, which is, you know, kaupapa Māori doesn't actually determine what you know, which way to act in every, you know, which specific way to act in every situation in parliamentary politics. You know, there's a lot
For
of
those
different
dying to know,
interpretations.
you are correct, Ben. Rawiri is 44 and Tākuta is 47.
interesting.
The interesting thing too is what are they like? What happens? Like, you know, you have people like Kiriama who say the only option is to fire Tākuta, but what does that look like if you were to fire him? If they did decide that that's what they want to do, and I don't think it is, but if you know, follow the logic, he remains in Parliament, right? Because he's an electorate MP, so you don't force an election. And if he stays, but he is not falling into line with his leadership, then, you know, does that cause more damage to the party? I think the people that vote for Pāti Māori are probably not going to swing back to Labour. So I don't know. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, it creates a real hornet's nest once you start going down that path. I mean, we've seen that already with the Greens, but that was with the list MP. Once you have an electorate MP, the biggest electorate in the country, no more. But there is always the option open to the incumbent in that seat to trigger a by-election and to say, all right, then we'll do, you know, and I will use that as a, you know, in the way that we've seen, for example, one Winston Peters do back in the day, so that it just creates a whole you know, it creates more of a mess to start moving down the road.
It does,
expulsion.
but it's a problem because, you know, that last Reid Research poll shows that it's a completely hung parliament unless Te Pāti Māori can hold on to all 6 seats. You know, so can Tākuta hold on to that seat? I mean, what does Te Pāti Māori want to do? Does Te Pāti Māori want to change the government? Is that an important goal for them? At the moment, maybe it's not. You know, maybe it's not. Maybe they just want to like slowly build up the movement. But if that seat is at risk because Tākuta is turning people off with posts like that, and you know, you've got big multicultural centres in that seat. You've got Christchurch. You've got Wellington. You know, it's not like Waiariki for say, you know, those sort of seats where there's not as much. Not that Christchurch is hugely multicultural, but you get the point. You know, are they risk? Is that seat at risk? And then what's the downward flow of what that means for whatever Te Pāti Māori's ambitions are in the future.
The other part of all this that you've touched on there in terms of what is the ambition of Te Pāti Māori is to be an activist party, an oppositional party, not to enter into any government form, or to maybe say we're more interested in situating ourselves in a way where we might offer support, confidence and supply to allow government proceed in exchange for some really important concessions, but we will continue to prosecute legislation as it comes and goes, rather than the budget. For the Labour Party, I mean, I was just looking at it, and it's less than a year ago. It's just over 10 months ago since there was that extraordinary hikoi in response to the Treaty Principles Bill, and we had at the time a press release that emerged from Labour, Te Pāti Māori and the Greens, co-signed by all 3 parties, urging Christopher Luxon to put an end to that bill, joined together obviously in opposition to something that was considered to be quite contemptible by all 3 of those parties. They had coordinated social media posts, and it seemed as though a moment had been harnessed in which a united front could be positioned to disabuse perceptions that this was a group that couldn't work together, the same old coalition of chaos rhetoric that we've seen espoused in both directions. And it looked like, all right, we're moving towards a bloc versus bloc situation in which voters will be able to choose which one they prefer. Now, Willie Jackson ramping up in his denunciation of the things that have been said, Chris Hipkins cowering, looking pretty uneasy in response to all of this. Where does it leave that side of politics?
Didn't Hipkins say that he criticised him? Didn't he say that he couldn't work with him or something
He
like that?
said something like, if this is going to continue to be the tenor of the messages that then it's hard to see how we could work alongside one another. So I think something
what a silly
along those.
thing to have said, I think. I mean, strategically, a silly thing to have said because he doesn't need to say anything. Do you know what I mean?
No,
you don't need to weigh in on this. This is their problem. You should just say, I think that what he said is terrible. I certainly wouldn't put up with it in my party, but, they can sort it out because now, if they don't get rid of him, but Labour still needs Te Pāti Māori, then he's gonna have to back down on what he said. Is he gonna hold that line the whole way through or not? I just think that he didn't need to get, besides from criticising the post, I think he should have just parked it there and let Te Pāti Māori problems be Te Pāti Māori problems instead of him sticking his oar into it.
I mean, I guess the first thing would be that I think he was talking specifically about taku te wheres. He said if that's indicative of what he continues to do, then he wouldn't be part of any government I led. So, I mean, it's pretty easy, I think, to rule taku te wheres out of a ministerial post, right? While leaving the door open for Debbie, Rawiri, others, I suppose. The second thing is, in terms of let Te Pāti Māori problems be Te Pāti Māori problems, man, I would imagine that's been Chris Hipkins' most earnest wish for the last about 2.5 years. But it becomes this sort of unceasing drumbeat of, how are you going to handle this? And, you're right. You don't actually have to stick by any of this stuff after the election. I think David Seymour and Winston Peters both said that they could never work together or sit around the cabinet table together. But up until then, there are just going to be these questions, about Te Pāti Māori and Labour, and, Chris Hipkins just has to deal with it, unfortunately for him. And I think that's the most salient part really of that by-election win, is that, it just means that I think Labour were probably hoping somehow that they could sort of write it off and, Penny would be reinstalled and they would say, look, let's see what happens after the election. Te Pāti Māori may not even have 6 seats. They might not have any seats because of, we're back. But now, it is something that they have to, I think, account for and deal with, in basically, every kind of communication they make. It's going to be a lot of mental strain for them.
It's genuinely a case study on how to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, this one, such a remarkable win to be completely overshadowed by all of this stuff. And I have to say, I feel aroha for Orini. This should be a really nice, special moment for her. But unfortunately not so.
It reminds us again of the golden rule, never ever post, especially not after midnight. You mentioned Winston Peters, who I think, to be fair to him, I don't think he ruled out working with David Seymour around the cabinet table. David Seymour definitely said he wouldn't sit around the cabinet table with Winston Peters. But Winston Peters had their own moment of great glory the other day when they had their party convention in the People's Republic of Palmerston North. And that was going well too. And then when you mention
Can I tell
defeat from the jaws of victory, Annabelle, Well, I was going to go on to talk about Stuart Nash's latest contribution to the vernacular in a year in politics that is much like reading the thesaurus on female genitalia. He was on, what was he on? Sean Plunkett's platform. You know that thing where they say that podcasts and, you know, products like that are really, when they work, they're like sitting around with your mates at the pub. Stuart Nash really lent into that when invited to define a woman. And he said, cover your ears, please, if you're easily upset by vulgar language. He said that a woman was defined as someone who had a pussy and a pair of tits, was it? Yeah.
What it? I don't. It's just so.
Look, he did.
I can't even. I just like. There's what? What can you even say
What
about?
can you say? Well,
okay. Ben, over to you.
Ben.
I mean, I think it's important to look at the surrounding context. You know,
I'll go and get around it. I'll get around
by
it.
that, do you mean like décolletage and labia, or what?
He started off. He started off by saying, you know, look, I've gotten in trouble for saying this before. And then how long was it later? About an hour later, he called back and said, I've talked to my wife and I've realized, and you know, she thinks I've realized I shouldn't have said that.
Okay, so just for the list, so far, everyone listening who's interested in a career in politics or just being a human being, don't post after midnight.
Yeah.
Don't continue a sentence if it begins with, my wife has told me off for saying this before. Carry on, Ben.
Well,
Don't go
no,
on
he said
Q&A
he'd
without your
gotten in
phone
trouble
as well.
before, and
Yeah,
so I was just sort of imagining, like, what was the time between his call into Plunkett and then calling back to apologize? Like, I just sort of imagine him running into the lounge or something and going like, hey, you know that thing that I got in trouble with you for saying? Well, Sean Plunkett thought it was great. Like, you know, a bit of new information here. The platform listeners take my side. Like, 1-0 for Stuart Nash. Like, yeah, Nash gets really excitable. I think he, you know, because his whole conference speech seemed to be about how the Labour Party had really deserted him, not because of any kind of policy position, but because when he had repeatedly breached the cabinet manual, Chris Hipkins had sacked him, even though he thought he was a mate. And and the Stuart Nash sort of mateship matrix for analysing politics is really kind of extraordinary. Like, you know, he's talking about his good friends at New Zealand First, when he first got into trouble for calling the police commissioner Andrew Coster, admittedly after he had been police minister, to, you know, tell him to appeal a case or the sentence was too light or whatever. He said, look, that wasn't me trying to influence the police commissioner as a politician. That was a mate calling another mate for a chat. You know, it's like, no, this isn't your mate. This is a public servant who used to report to you, right? But in Stuart Nash's mind, he's like, that's my friend from Wellington who comes and visits me every week and tells me exciting stories about car chases and criminals. And like, and I think he got so excited by his new politically incorrect friends that, yeah, he acted out and he misjudged.
To just briefly back up the Stuart Nash branded fire truck for a moment, for those who weren't paying attention, it was the worst kept secret in New Zealand politics that Stuart Nash was on a path, on a journey towards the New Zealand First Party, and that was seemingly confirmed when he was the guest speaker. He was the guest speaker at the New Zealand First convention.
It's the continuation of that thing that is like his valedictory, like it's the bloody man who gets up in the arena and dusts himself off and
100%.
walks towards the New Zealand First.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, AGM. Bruised.
How about this?
Sword held high in the air.
How about this? So you know how there was a news line this week, a press release no less, from New Zealand First announcing that Shane Jones is the deputy leader of the New Zealand First Party, which was, and you know, most people thought Shane Jones was the deputy leader of the New Zealand First Party, and he was, the press release acknowledged indeed that many people had called him the de facto deputy leader of the New Zealand First Party, but now he is officially the de facto. And I wondered, this is conjecture to be clear, but this is a podcast, it's like being at the pub with your friends. You know, part of the attraction of Stuart Nash, one could imagine, for New Zealand First is that he's won the seat of Napier 3 times, including in John Key term from 2014, he won Napier. And if you were thinking about succession in the New Zealand First Party, not that will happen anytime soon in the leadership, in let's say in 100, 200 years, when there's a change of leader, that one of the things that you would like is an insurance policy, and that insurance policy comes in the form of a constituency seat. Shane Jones had a couple of bashes at that, didn't work out, didn't have, not his favourite thing. You know, knocking on doors by his own account, and so that would be one of the appeals in Stuart Nash. And there's been a few murmurings around that Shane Jones hasn't loved Stuart Nash's march from the arena, the man in the arena towards New Zealand First. Don't know if there's anything in that, but that Shane Jones would be a good time if you were Shane Jones to say, I would like my deputy leadership confirmed at this juncture, please. Winston, what do you make of that, Ben?
Yeah, I heard somebody suggested to me that, you know, Winston was bringing Nash in as a sort of, you know, you play your sort of subordinates against each other or whatever. No, I don't really buy any of that. I think Shane Jones and Stuart Nash are mates. They do get along. I think that
they're on the Matrix, the Ben Thomas Matrix.
Yeah. If there is, you were saying, you know, thinking about, a time after Winston Peters. Well, Winston Peters is certainly not thinking about a time after Winston Peters. I'm not quite sure what might have. I mean, my colleague Fletcher Tabuto was the deputy leader of New Zealand First when they were in Parliament in 2017 to 2020. I assumed he still was, so I think this is actually a traumatic demotion for him. I don't know whether maybe he stepped out of line. Who knows? I don't think there's too much to sort of read into it. I mean, the thing is, Shane Jones has been on a roll recently. You know, the public meetings that he's been having, he's been getting hundreds of people. He's been extremely active in the media in terms of profile. It might just be a sort of, it's time to sort of formalize it. And, but because, Jones is really getting out around the country, doesn't like knocking on doors, but really, really likes a crowd. So yeah, look, I don't see any sort of, maneuverings kind of in there, at all. I
do you think maybe to assure New Zealand First supporters, because Shane is so popular with them, as you say, that was it perhaps to assure New Zealand First voters that even though Stuart Nash was coming into the fold, that Shane was still like 2IC?
And he, of course, has
uphold his mother.
When it comes
perhaps
to scatological matters, Shane Jones has an absolutely perfect record. Nothing in there at all.
The Party of Women New Zealanders is Look, it's strange timing for an announcement, but I don't see anything sort of sinister in it. New Zealand First. I think
let's discuss it no further. It's just a small footnote.
Waiho.
Let's talk though before we ago about the issue around the Palestinian statehood decision, which the inference seems to be that it was discussed at Cabinet and that a in principle decision has been made. There have been various factors that have, for one reason and another, I think it's fair to say, up the pressure, the focus on this issue, mostly relating to what's been happening in Gaza. Of course, we had this week a UN Commission of Inquiry concluding that Israel has committed genocide against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip on 4 of 5 counts. They said that it met the criteria. In a much more local, I suppose, version, we had both the march in Tamaki Makaurau on the weekend, and then in Johnsonville, we've had a group of clergy chaining themselves outside Nicola Willis's office, which I thought I thought that was a slight mistake to describe that scene as intimidating. I thought that is not what I would necessarily think to be intimidating. I'm not a member of the Johnsonville community, I should acknowledge that, but it's intimidating in that they were probably like cups of tea, chocolate digestive biscuits, intimidating rather than
intimidating for the Zip that was having to like keep the teapots like
intimidating for the Zip, yeah,
but not for them a distraction. Maybe I just thought those people are absolutely heroic in my eyes. It's
played out in Parliament this week as well, because David Seymour, when pressed by the gallery for his position on Palestinian statehood, said, to quote him, "I'm not going to recognise a state that's currently weaponising hostages, holding people for years on end at absolutely inhumane conditions. I mean, who would recognise that?" Now, Winston Peters did not take kindly to that, and he basically gave Seymour a dressing down in public over that, said that's the position of the foreign minister to announce, and then I think he used Latin to call him a callow youth or something to that effect, which of course is opposite. I don't know. Amid all of this, Annabelle, I'm sort of left in a way scratching my head as to why do we have to wait until the General Assembly, the Leaders' Week of the General Assembly, where Winston Peters is going to stand up and announce New Zealand's position, it sounds like, or in some forum or other, presumably at the General Assembly. I don't know. It's confusing to me. I understand he is the foreign minister. He feels as though that is his position to run. But where does that leave Luxon? I mean, Luxon had this moment where he said, what did he say of Netanyahu? He said he'd lost the plot.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where he seemed to have slipped away from his talking points and expressed something.
His genuine thoughts.
That was actually, I guess, kind of colloquial or something. I don't know. Why are we waiting? I mean, if decisions have been made, why don't we?
This is a great question. Why are we waiting? I have no idea. Are we waiting because, I mean, obviously there's coalition partners who are not supportive of this. I thought Seymour's statement was kind of a strange one, because we know that that Hamas has been willing to return the hostages on a number of occasions in terms of the negotiations that have been done, but also there's tens of thousands of Palestinians, including children, that are imprisoned in Israel, who have, with having never gone through a court case or anything like that. So it's not, in terms of why you wouldn't, that's probably not a great reason, because actually the other side is no different. And in fact, there's when we have seen ceasefires in the past, it'll be a certain amount of hostages released and then like hundreds of Palestinians, because there's just so many of them being held. I don't know if they're holding off for the UN General Assembly so that there's more pageantry around this announcement, or if it's because the finer details of what is to be said is still being hammered out. I'm not sure. I think it's probably, to be fair to Winston, that they're still hammering out the details of it.
True, certainly, that the vast number of countries around the world have acknowledged Palestinian statehood in some form. There are different versions of it. There are different caveats that have come with different countries. Some have said, a small number have said, we will acknowledge Palestinian statehood on these conditions. And so is that your read on it, Ben? That there is still an ongoing push and pull within Cabinet on whether or not it is conditional upon X and Y, or is it done and it's just a case of Winston of it being some kind of protocol issue about how this is revealed to the world?
Yeah, well, look, obviously not clear. My sense would be that Seymour would not be going off if there had actually been a sort of final cabinet decision made yet. That suggests that it's still in the realm of sort of grey area or argument between parties, and whether that's the exact framing of it or the terms or what, I don't have any idea. In terms of it was reported today, I think, that Keir Starmer is going to acknowledge a Palestinian state or acknowledge Palestinian statehood at the UN. That was, anonymous sources. And so it could be that, we have recently tended to try and move in lockstep with the UK, with Canada, with Australia, and not sort of be kind of one out, kind of do that sort of strength in numbers thing, I suppose, particularly in terms of any kind of backlash from the United States. So that could be part of the sort of neither confirm nor deny strategy right now. And, we'll tell you at the assembly.
Yeah. I mean, Starmer had already said they would recognise a Palestinian state, as is Albanese, clearly. I guess the one thing that might be worth noting is that I think that Luxon has said that it was a question of when, not if. Is that right? So they may feel that there's that the broad decision has been signalled, and it's a matter of the specifics and the formal announcement. I don't know.
I mean, I think in a literal sense, when Luxon was talking about, a matter of when, not if, he was talking about New Zealand's long-standing support for a two-state solution. So, New Zealand has always been on record saying, we will acknowledge Palestinian state when there are two states as per the Macaulay plan.
Yeah.
The
Macaulay Accords.
The rest of the world
that's what everyone's waiting for, is Murray Macaulay to rock up and fix it all forever.
Bring back Murray.
Hey, we should get out of here. Thanks for your company. Apologies again for perpetrating disinformation in Christchurch. TI here said it would be fine. So, what were we to do? Okay, we out? All right, thank you.
Thank you, dear.
The Spin-off Podcast Network.